Oh yeah, sexy biscuits. Nice.
Long Boys 1975. YouTubers on the rise. Reviewing games late at night and sometimes friends. But Long Boys 1975.
Hey YouTube, Long Boys Post 1975 and welcome to a random vlog. What I want to talk about this week, well, it's in the title. Computer games. Computer games in TV when I was a kid was a big deal. Now, this question is, and these memories I want to share, primarily, I guess, aimed at those of us who are aged Generation X, basically, because the thing is, I am aware immediately when you say, computer games, video games in TV, immediately people think of, Games Master. And rightly so. I love Games Master, by the way. I love Games Master. It's absolutely fantastic. It was genuinely funny, interesting to watch because the tournaments and stuff like that were absolutely mental and brilliant. Had big characters and stuff like that, big egos, but it covered all the cool games and shit like that. And it didn't take itself too seriously. And basically, yeah, it was cool. It really was. I mean, didn't they try and bring it back? I think they did try and bring it back. I can't remember if I watched any of it because, quite frankly, I don't want to live in a world of Games Master, which the late great Sir Patrick Moore isn't in, because that was genius as well, as having Patrick Moore as the Games Master. But yeah, this isn't about that, because obviously Games Master is the pinnacle of video game TV. And obviously there was stuff like in the 90s, Bad Influence, which I was never a fan of. I watched it, but I had two problems with Bad Influence. One, I owned a Super Famicom and a Japanese Mega Drive, and and a Japanese PlayStation. So my big problem with Bad Influence was that it covered shite PAL games. And my other big problem with Bad Influence was it was clearly written by people who knew about video games and stuff like that, and then handed to people, presenters. I'm mainly talking about Andy Crane about this, ex-Broom Cupboard Andy Crane, who, when they presented, just came across as someone who just, and I could be wrong on this, but this is just what, and I was a young adult at this point, anyway, to be fair, just came across as someone who didn't play video games. He really didn't. He just seemed awkward and a bit fumbly and stuff like that. But I did enjoy it, and Violet was cool as well. But yeah, I did enjoy it, and I did like it, but it wasn't brilliant, was it? No offence if you like Bad Influence, but then to be fair, I'm allowed to not like Bad Influence. But yeah, I'm not talking about that. I'm not talking about the 90s, because obviously Generation X, computers and playing video games for me at home kicked off in the early 80s, in 1982, as it did for a lot of people, like, Commodore kids and stuff like that. A little bit later on for the Amstrad and stuff like that, BBC Micro 1982 and shit like that, because obviously the computer literacy program by the BBC to get a computer into every school, which was the BBC Micro and stuff like that. But it was a big deal. You loved computers. This was the birth of a generation, and shit was good, with the Commodore 64 and ZX Spectrum and stuff like that. It was good. But you literally got scraps, like literal scraps, on TV. Like, no one was really, apart from one show, which we'll get to, which was boring as hell, but we still watched it as kids. We ate it up. But yeah, no one was really taking this computer thing that seriously. And yeah, so you would watch any TV program, any show, and a few shows kind of got it with very small segments, which were covered, like Saturday Morning Kids TV and stuff like that. But yeah, like, no one really made programs for kids about computers. Well, they didn't make programs for kids about computers. Like I said, we got literal scraps. And there are things in movies and stuff like that, a couple of kids' movies and kids' TV shows that you would watch. And so you would seek these things out and you would watch them. Even if it only meant you got literally 30 seconds of exposure to a video game or an arcade game or something like that. Because it was your world when you were a kid. I mean, I was what? 6 in 1982, 6 going into 7 in 1982. So yeah, I ate this shit up. I did, and me and my brothers would search out this stuff, these scraps being fed to you, because you just wanted to see it. And you wanted, as much exposure to it as you could get. So, I mean, honourable mention must go to two movies, right? Because that's what kind of inspired me wanting to talk about this. I bought one of these movies from a charity shop the other day for £1, and it's Matthew Broderick, War Games, which is an absolute fantastic movie of the 80s. And I'm pretty sure responsible for every kid this side and that side of the Atlantic vandalising phones. Because what was it? You unscrewed the bottom of the receiver and then you put a ring pull from a can on it and then you screwed it back up and it would somehow give you free credit. I know, allegedly, me and my brothers went into a couple of phone boxes and tried to do that, and guess what? Couldn't get the fucking end of the phone off, to be fair, even before we could put a ring pull in there. But yeah, that wasn't based on a game or anything like that. The kid, was a hacker. But it was the fact that a home computer and its setup when you were a kid was sick, because we didn't even know what modems were until we watched this movie. But yeah, the fact that he had a computer, he had a modem, spoilers, he changed his school grades and shit like this. But it was just the fact that it had a computer in it, and the entire movie was based around the computer and the cool shit he could do with the computer, ultimately including saving the world from World War III. But then there was Daryl, which I think stood for something, but it was the robot kid who was an astronaut, but the point being, he was just like you or I. But he was a robot. Oh, the 80s, you were amazing. And he was playing, I'm pretty sure it was this, and I'm pretty sure the next thing I want to talk about is an honourable mention, which is a TV show, stole it. But yeah, he was playing, was it Space Invaders on the Atari 2600? And he was just fucking amazing at it, because he was a robot. Now, we didn't have an Atari 2600, but we knew what Atari 2600s were, and our neighbours had one and lent it to us for like a weekend once. But the point was, there it was, in a movie that our mum rented for us when we were really young, because it was all over TV and stuff like that. Because it was a kids movie. It was a big kids movie. Like going Saturday Superstore, was it at this point, or Going Live? One of the two ones of those, because they were, one was before and one was after. And I mean, like, not at the same time, concurrent. They ran like that, well, and then got replaced, but essentially the same sort of show. Anyway, so yeah, like just the fact that you saw this Atari 2600 in the movie, and the fact that this robot kid was just too fucking good for it, and I think it smoked. And then I'm pretty sure there was a TV show, and I'm pretty sure this show nicked that scene, or maybe I'm having a Mandela effect and remembering something that didn't even happen, where there was a kid, and it was a kid's book called Chucky and Chucky's Children, and I don't know, Return of Chucky, and it was like this alien who showed up in this kid's bedroom. ITV or BBC, can't remember, super cheap special effects, like a flashing bulb in the corner or something, and it got into the kid's consciousness, and the music was like Chucky. Yeah, I know, I can sing, and you all used to sing it at school just because it was fucking stupid. But the point is, I think they stole the Atari 2600 scene from Daryl in that kid's show, because he had the consciousness of an alien in him, and he was playing it too fast, and he made the Atari 2600 smoke or crash or something like that. But again, you saw it on TV, and it was like, it was a reflection of you, what you were into, what you loved, your hobbies, and there it was on TV in the movies. Then obviously, because of this program, this government program with the BBC to get a computer into every school, called the Computer Literacy Program, there was a program called, was it Microlight? There was a weekly show that started in 1983, and it was about showing everyone, it wasn't really a kids show, it was more like a kind of current affair aimed at young adults, and young to, middle-aged adults, but not really kids. And it was like part of this literacy program, and the intro had an owl fly off a tree and in through a window, and it was supposed to be the owl from the BBC computer, I believe. But we watched it because they did show computers on there, and a lot of it went flying over our heads because we didn't know bugger all about half these things in there. And like I said, it was a little bit more aimed at adults, and lots of the stuff on there was probably more serious applications for computers and stuff like that, like word processing and spreadsheets and shit like that, which you just didn't give a fuck about as a kid because you just wanted games. So it was boring, a large part of it, and we didn't understand a large part of it, but every now and then you get a snippet of a game, and that's what you sat there for, and that's what you watched it for, and that was early evening, I believe. Early evening, probably around maybe 6, 7 o'clock, 6:30, 7 o'clock, but you watched it because that was all you could get, that was your hit for computers. And then, right, Tomorrow's World. I used to like Tomorrow's World as a kid because it was this program on BBC Two. Microlight was on BBC Two. Microlive, I believe. Microlive. doing this off my head. I wrote them down, but I just plucked them out of my head and shit like that. So, yeah, Tomorrow's World. We used to watch that as a kid a lot because it was the whole point of that was look at these inventions that aren't around right now but could be coming in the near future and will change your life. No one else remembers this, but I do remember this, and I remember leaving this in the comment section on someone's video once about stuff that you'd seen on TV. And this was when I had my YouTube channel, but it had no content. I wasn't even interested in making content, but I watched this video by someone talking about computers on TV, and I said, I always remember when I was a kid, and stuff like this was, you know, in the Famicom years in Japan, was, you know, available for, you know, Nintendo consoles and stuff like that, more so for the discs, to be fair, but you could go to this machine, or they were showing this machine, so whether it actually came out or not, I don't know. Maybe it was in a North American thing where, you know, obviously the Atari 2600 VCS was far bigger than it was here, but, you know, did alright here, where if you were bored of your game, you take your game, because obviously it's got, you know, it's just a ROM, and you take the cartridge and you stick it in this machine and you put money in it, and then you could pick a game and it would, you know, code, burn, whatever, I don't know, a new game image onto your cartridge. Now that to me was amazing, because this would have been before we had our ZX Spectrum and obviously the dizzy highs and the ease of piracy, allegedly, if you know what I mean. But yeah, not knowing anything about ROM technology because I'm a little kid, that to me was like, but again, it was computers on TV. And then, right, this is how desperate we're getting, because I'll get to some of the more kind of proper video gamey stuff in a bit. But there was a quiz show. Now, there was half an hour that the BBC had to kill, because kids' TV basically ended at 5:30, Monday to Friday. Children's BBC ended at 5:30. Then they had to kill half an hour till the news started at 6 o'clock. So more often than not, they do it with like TV shows, like repeats of old Flintstones and stuff like that, which to be fair, as a kid, I didn't mind. Flintstones, Jetsons. Then they showed Charles in Charge and stuff like that again. Quite like that show. Didn't mind. And then once a week, and I'm pretty sure it was BBC, but by all means correct me if I'm wrong, because ITV, BBC, when you're a kid, your memories, they all blur into one, don't they, to be fair. There was a quiz show with kids from different schools. You know, think your typical panel show. 3 people on one side of the studio, 3 people on the other side of the studio, behind like a, you know, a bench with a buzzer each, and quickfire questions, general knowledge, things like that. And it was boring as shit. Didn't care anything about that. Didn't care about general knowledge quiz shows when you were a kid. It was trying to be a little bit more educational and shit like that. The reason we liked it was there were 2 rounds in this show. Pretty sure it was 2, maybe it was 1, where they would play a video game. So it was like a bonus round, but they'd still get points, and the points would count to their score. I don't even know whether they won. You never won shit that was worth fuck all in these shows, particularly on the BBC, because they scooped all the license fee money off and were cheap bastards with it. But I think you just got like, I don't know, a plaque or something shit. But yeah, me and my brothers would sit through this. Didn't care about anything. We just sit there religiously, and I know I wasn't alone on this until they played the events from Track and Field by Konami. Remember Track and Field? Sorry, Hypersports. It wasn't Track and Field, it was Hypersports, and you watched it just for that. And it was the arcade. It wasn't like the micro versions or stuff like that. You watched this entire show, even though you know there was only one bit in the middle where they would play around, and yeah. And you watched it for that. So I definitely remember the vaulting off the horse. Not a horse, but a horse, if you know what I mean. And there was swimming in it, I'm pretty sure. But it was the fact that you were seeing an arcade game. So they kind of knew that kids were into this. And they wanted to see it. And they were like, look at us being cool and edgy and hip. And putting that shit that kids like in our show. Probably realised that was the only reason that they were getting viewing figures, though, was from the really young kids who stuck around after the end of BBC, you know, kids TV, just to see these video games. And we did. So I can remember the swimming. I can remember the vaulting off the horse. Was there archery? I want to say yes, but again, I could be, you know, imagining these. But the other thing that was cool about it was, then, after they played that game to death, because it obviously ran for a few series, didn't it? They then let the kids play Paperboy. And again, because it was the arcade version of Paperboy, we'd sit through this boring ass, you know, educational kids TV quiz show thing that we really didn't care about, just so we could see a level from Paperboy and a level from Hypersports. I don't know why I'm humming. I just talked about the games. So, like I said, it was literal scraps. But computers are just now a massive part of your world, and you're really, really young. Like 5, 6, 7, 8, shit like that. So you would eat this stuff up. You would eat it up, and then you had Saturday morning kids TV, and particularly Get Fresh with Gaz Top. I love Get Fresh. Saturday morning kids TV was amazing back in the day. That was the one on ITV, wasn't it? That was on a little bit later, because you had really early stuff where you had like Cheryl, what's her name, from the band Bucks Fizz, making food for you, and it was really stupid food, and it was really dumbed down cooking for kids. And then stuff like Going Live would kick in. I mean, there was Saturday Superstore, which didn't really have any games in it, but Going Live did, and they used to have a section where they would review video games. So you're getting proper stuff here. Like again, a proper bit. And they took 3 really, really young kids, and then they took them and they said, you've all got a £5 or a £10, and they all went to the high street by really crap special effects, disappearing at the studio and appearing in the high street. You can watch some of these on YouTube and it make a stupid noise. And then they'd all try one of the top 10 ZX Spectrum games. I can only remember Spectrum shit, and I can only find Spectrum shit on YouTube. And to be fair, I could only find one. I'm assuming they did more than one. I can't remember more than one. And then they came back, and then each kid would review the game they got, and it's utterly cringeworthy, but you loved it as a kid because it was as embarrassing it is watching it as an adult, because some kid would just go and just not even understand how a game played, and just go, I like this game because it's got really good graphics and it beeps. Thanks, kid from the early 80s. But it literally was like that. But as a young kid, seeing your demographic up there, going into the high street, seeing them in a store with games, it was usually like W.H. Smith or Boots like that, picking it, coming back, Sarah Green was asking them questions, again you could clearly see nothing about computers and shit like that. Getting these kids review it, that was brilliant as a kid. That was absolutely brilliant. That was like, that was a bit more than scraps. We ate that shit up. That properly was like bread and butter for us. And it was the fact that, again, they had their finger on the pulse. They knew shit, and stuff like that. And some of these shows as well, they would give away, like microcomputers and stuff like that. It's competitions. Again, this video is primarily about the 80s. Well, no, it's about the 80s. Because, like I said, scraps. Play a drinking game, and the number of times I say the word scraps in this video, you'll be wankered. And then the other morning kids shows that, like on Saturday, because I was talking about, Get Fresh, but I sidetracked into Going Live. Pretty sure it was Going Live. No, it was Going Live. Well, Get Fresh would have a quiz once a week, where kids quiz competition, and we loved this because they would use Atari ST and Amiga games, and so I didn't know anyone who had those until like second, third year at school. That's when my brother got it, because that's around about when I got my Mega Drive, because you started to get this disposable income and you could save towards these big expensive computers yourself. See my many videos about me getting a Japanese import Mega Drive, and understanding how things like that worked. But yeah, so you were all like in 8-bit micro town, your mates had Commodore 64s, and you thought that was impressive, even though it clearly wasn't as good as ZX Spectrum, which is why you fought vehemently in the Playground Wars. I'm a veteran of the Playground Wars, by the way. I served 3 tours: ZX Spectrum versus Commodore 64, Sega Master System versus NES, which was quite an easy Playground War, to be perfectly honest, because no one had a fucking NES, and then the Mega Drive against the SNES, even though I owned both Japanese variants of those consoles, but yeah, still always preferred Sega. What can I say? But yeah, so slight sidetrack there. But you were all like in 8-bit micros, and you loved them and shit like that, and they were capable of some pretty impressive stuff. But they wouldn't stand up on TV, would they? And these people wanted to draw viewers in again, so just like a 2-minute, 5-minute segment of showing video games, you'd have to have a decent system. So you'd have a touch-tone phone, and there would be a competition, and you'd have to submit your name on a sealed envelope, on the back of a sealed envelope or postcard, and then they would draw people randomly. Then they call you, or you'd call you, presumably. They couldn't make you pay for the bill. It's the early 80s. I mean, Jesus, we're all in recession and broke. But the point was, if you had a touch-tone phone, which to me still blows my mind that this tech did work and made it playable. You and one other person, another caller, and you would play games. And the 2 games that they had, I don't think they had anymore, but I definitely remember these 2 for sure, was Xenon by the Bitmap Brothers, which was probably the best looking, shiniest vertical scrolling shoot 'em up back then. Because honestly, the Bitmap Brothers were people of law. You know, they were gods amongst men. Their stuff looked cut above everyone else's stuff. And it was just so cool, metallic and shiny, and never seen anything like it. And these kids would have to see who could get the furthest on the first level, and they were playing it on the touch tone of their phone. So we're like up, down, left, right, and then a fire button. My God, how far we've come. But as a viewer, this was compelling shit. We absolutely loved this. And then later on, so I don't even know how this would work. I'm sure this was still down the phone. By all means, correct me if I'm wrong. It's a long time ago. We're looking at 40 plus years. They played Star Glider. They played Star Glider down the phone. Again, these kids were crap, they won a prize, stuff like that. You didn't care about them. It could have been anyone playing it. It could have been someone in the studio. It was the fact that they were playing games on the TV, and you love games and you love computers, and that's all you wanted. That's all you wanted to see. And it was such a big deal because, as I said, and why I wanted to make this video, there was so little of it on TV. Absolutely so little of it on TV. And that's it. That's pretty much all I can remember, and that's pretty much all you got in the 80s. If anyone else can remember any TV shows, primarily TV shows or bits of TV shows, you know, where they did stuff like that, by all means let me know in the comments down below, because that is literally all I can remember. But we ate it up because there was nothing else. And computers, like, you think computers were big in the 90s? The explosion in the early 80s was huge. Like, it just took off phenomenally. Great Britain made more computers in the early 80s than any other country in the world. So, like, you wanted this to be reflected in your TV, especially as a kid, and that's all we got. And it was a big deal. Like I said, little scraps, but it was a big deal. I can't be the only one who was, like, you know, hooked on this shit as a kid, and also thought it was a big deal. So by all means, I'd love to know what you think. Anyway, thank you very much for watching. I'll see you later.